Bitcoin is close to becoming worthless.
Let's go. Now, what's the Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like rat poison.
Yeah. Oh,
The greatest scam in history.
let's get it.
Bitcoin will go to fucking zero.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another Confab episode. This episode is with fundamentals, but before we dive into it, I'm going to read through the top boosts from the last episode with Oscar Merry from Fountain. Tone Wrecker with 10,000 sats. Great to get these updates from Oscar at Fountain. Still playing with how my RSS hosted music under Tone Wrecker tracks functions differently from what is under Paul Birkin on Wavelake. At Henry with 5,000 sats. I would never have heard of Ungovernable Misfits were it not on Fountain and Pies' relentless mushroom rocket and strong arms, 420 sat boosts. And where would I be without poignant imagery of Subway Guy, vaginal blood farts, and Max's crusty feet haunting my subconscious? Probably not trying to wipe my mind with Dr. Glenn Morangi. Cheers, guys. Bleeding edge stuff. Jadkey with 5,000 sats. CanaryReviews.io. I don't know what that is, so I'm not endorsing it or anything. Tread carefully. Blazer with 1,000 sats. Can't think of a clever or witty boost. Good show though. FOMOmetronic! Exclamation mark. Able, or AIBLE, with 801 sats. Without Fountain, I wouldn't know about Ungovernable Misfits, so I'll always be grateful for that. Keep the hard work going, Brother Max. Bitcoin Boomer 12. Fascinating episode. I'm listening on Fountain when possible, but sometimes it's good to see the speakers as well, so I have to still use Spotify sometimes. I don't find Noster very easy or useful, but I just keep going because I know it will get better and I will get better. Oscar explains stuff really well. BHREX8. Great content and useful info. Wartime. Good rip. Been a fan of Fountain since the beginning, and it was amazing when I heard them switching to use Noster. The new mashup is fire. Pies of the pleb. Beers, mushroom, American flag, gun, film, strong arm, salute, British flag, plus Great British flag equals shit. Oh, actually probably agree, to be honest, mate. User 872499965. Newbie on Fountain. Already think it's the future. Welcome, mate. And finally, Shadrach, boosting 70 sats a minute. Thank you, mate. Much appreciated. Thank you to everyone who's been supporting the show with boosts, Paynim support, Lightning, XMR chat, and all the other ways that people have been helping this show grow. Before we start, I just want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors. I'll start with Cake Wallet, our new sponsors. It took me a long time trying to sift through and find people that Ungovernable Misfits would work with. It might sound like it's easy, but there's a lot of scammy bullshit in the space. There's lending and thieving and everything else that goes along with it. And to find a company that just builds and ships without all the bullshit is tough. Cake Wallet have been around for a long time, and you can use them on pretty much every platform. You can use them on your iPhone or Android device, or for desktop, you can use them on Windows, Mac, and Linux. The UX is clean and simple. Literally any idiot can use this, myself included, but under the hood it's pretty powerful. You can connect this to your Bitcoin and Monero nodes. You can use silent payments. You can exchange within the wallet. And for those of you who actually use your Bitcoin, you can buy gift cards to pay for petrol, groceries, or anything else you might need. If you care about your privacy, security, and actually building this circular economy we will talk about, I'd suggest checking Cake Wallet out. go to cakewallet.com. For Android, you can download the APK or otherwise visit the App Store. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, and I'll be having Seth and some of the other team members on the show very soon. Check them out at cakewallet.com. And finally, a huge thank you to Foundation. We wouldn't be where we are without them. They have been supporting us for years now and helped us grow. I had someone whinge in the comments that I had said the best hardware wallet, that it was definitive, and apparently that's legacy, so I'll rephrase it a little bit. I think, and most of the people that I respect think, that Foundation make the best hardware device. The Passport is fully open source, it's beautifully designed, it's piss easy to use. Literally anybody can use this thing without having to read a million guides just to send a transaction. It has all the features that anyone could really need. And if you really struggle, you can pay an extra $99 and have Bitcoin Q&A hold your hand through the setup process. You can even have help setting up a multisig. This is the hardware that I suggest to all my friends and family. And if you haven't already checked them out, go to foundation.xyz and you can use the code ungovernable for a discount. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. Enjoy the show. Early morning for Mr. Fundamentals.
Well, this is pretty normal, actually.
Is
for
it?
me. It's normal. It's not like I'm used to waking up, making some coffee, and then doing math for a couple hours.
Is that your routine, is it? I'm sure John's told me that.
Yeah.
He said something like, yeah, you get up and then you like go and sun your balls while doing maths equations.
Yeah, well, the balls normally aren't part of the math. I wish they were, but
There's only two to count, I assume.
I do go outside. I mean, if the weather permits, I try to be outside in the morning, with the sunrise. It is dark here. Like I just went out to walk my dog before we ripped, and there are stars still out there, really bright, pretty amazing actually.
It's Pennsylvania you're in, isn't it?
Yeah,
The same place that old Johnny D is lurking.
yep. We're sort of on opposite sides of the state.
Probably for the best.
That's funny. We've been trying to get him to come to some, like, we go to the smack dab middle of the state to have like some events. We're working on them. Everybody loves John,
Oh, I'm too busy. Can't do it.
I mean, he really is. He's busier than we are.
He is now particularly busy. It's impossible to actually get hold of him now. Just screens my calls and gets on with more important business.
I could see it.
Yeah. You've done your maths already, or am I interrupting that?
Well, so this would be a day where I'll just do it later,
Okay.
This time, it's a little odd to just wake up and get right on a podcast, but it's fun. It's fun. So I've been, really looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, we've never spoken before.
Yeah, we've never really talked.
No, I fucking hate texting. Although I do it a lot in all like the Telegram groups and like organizing our Governor Misfits, I actually fucking hate it. So for me, having a conversation on a messaging app doesn't do anything. Like I don't feel like, oh, I know that person at all, or I've got anything from it. It just like stresses me out. So for me, like having a conversation like this and getting to know people is by far the best way. You're lurking in all the... Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I must be like really retarded because I can feel like best friends with somebody after a text.
Well, you probably can read and write, which probably helps.
I think I'm so autistic. Like, I just think I'm so fucking autistic that I end up in this world where this idealized world where we're just like fucking awesome. Like, oh my God. I mean, just so many people understand me. This is insane.
You're in the right place with your autism. We are surrounded by fucking autists.
If a text doesn't end with some kind of like horrible argument, I feel like I was understood.
Winning.
Yeah, So yeah, I love Telegram. I just love it.
The voice notes are good, but no one really likes them.
Yeah, I will say if you're really trying to get somebody to understand you, it's not great.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to be happy until you get like confirmation that they actually know what you said. It's not a great medium.
No, it is, especially when you cannot read or write properly. It's fucking it's fucking horrific. So yeah, no, I thought it'd be good to just catch up with you. Like our paths cross a lot in different groups, and I don't listen to a huge amount of pods, but I caught you on the Bugle the other day. I was chuckling away, and I thought,
All right. I really don't know how that thing went because, there's nobody willing to stand by their own identity to give me feedback on it. Those guys are their characters, and they were shitting on me for 2 hours, and it's just that was a hard one to walk away from and say, ooh, that went really well. But it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
It was good. It was good. I only listened to half of it because I was at the gym, and then I listened to like the first half, and I was like, I'm actually not training here. I'm just like chuckling away and just like fucking around. I was like, no, I need to put some music on now. But no, it was good.
First half was a good half. You should finish it.
Okay.
But that was definitely. I thought for myself, like, where would you get my best? Probably the first half.
And you do your Rock Paper Bitcoin podcast as well with Business Cat, don't you?
Yep.
How many episodes are you doing on that? Is it like a weekly thing? Or?
We do every other week. So
Okay.
we just released episode 49. So we got our big 50 coming up.
Oh, nice. Celebrating?
Yeah, I mean, we're just gonna note the number. I think we might actually. We actually have a plan. We have a plan so we never have a plan. So we'll do something a little special.
Nice. And what do you cover on Rock Paper Bitcoin? Is it just like general? Is it news, or is it like not that Bitcoin related? Or
it's really strange. The best way I could describe it is it's just like a continual conversation with Business Cat and I. So every 2 weeks we just catch up, and everybody sort of just catches up on where we are. But we are like, I feel like we're taking people through our journey, kind of like you are with where you are professionally. I'm going through I went through something very similar, and like the first 30 episodes of the show were me explaining that that's about to happen. Like I'm about to lose my job, and I'm gonna have figure out this post fiat thing. And Business Cat is in his rabbit hole around like the geomagnetic pole shift and things like that. And so it's sort of we're just having a conversation about where we are in our lives, and it's people have decided that they like that.
it's very different vibe to like something that's too structured and feels just not real, basically. So I think they always make for the best pods. The move away from fiat and you getting fired, what happened there? Again, just from John, he was like, oh, you were ex-finance, similar to like Ben Gunn sort of thing, and then had left. But I don't really know the story, so what happened with it?
Yeah, okay. So the story begins on a sunny day in 1974. A baby was born. That was me. Born to two autistic parents. So I was always a square peg in a round hole. The way I describe myself somehow surviving in like the TradFi in the normal world was, you know that meme of Big Bird on the Death Star? This is me at work today. And it's like, yeah, it's like Big Bird. It's like a bunch of, soldiers following Darth Vader. And then there's Big Bird, just sticks out. So I was trained to be something called an actuary.
Okay.
I don't know if you have any idea what
it's like an accountant, isn't it?
Yeah, an actuary is an accountant. So, ideally, right, like the way a police report would describe an actuary, I'd say an accountant that deals with uncertain outcomes. So they traditionally work in fields like insurance, where
probabilities.
Yeah, you're accounting for things like cash flows, but you don't know when they're going to happen because you don't know when people are going to die, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So we call them contingent outcomes.
Okay.
So I was trained to be an actuary, and I was internally, my own autistic way, actually believed that they did some idealized version of this, and I thought I was going to save the world with my ability to understand, financial systems that are probabilistic. And so, my career started in the 90s. I kept getting really bored, more and more bored with it. I got very disillusioned because I saw the majority of actuaries actually didn't do what I just described. They were what you end up doing as an accountant is, or what an accountant typically gets paid to do, is to set assumptions and then sign their name to say these are the assumptions that we're comfortable with. And they're usually assumptions that make a company look better than they are. When it comes to what an actuary does, we look at companies' liabilities. So, like, imagine a pension, a UK pension scheme, as they call it there, right? An actuary would say it's well funded or it's not well funded. They would understand, how long it's going to have to pay its claims for. They would look at the amount of money that's in there and say, based on certain assumptions, yes or no, they're solvent. And so it could be that the plan is solvent if you assume an 11% interest rate. But if you assume a 7% interest rate, it's not solvent. Now, without getting into why a lower discount rate means higher liability, we lived through in the last 2 years why raising rates lowered the long-term value of bonds to the point where it became problematic for banks, right? So it does the same thing for liabilities as it does for assets. Higher interest rates means lower asset values, lower liabilities, right? So actuary will want to tell a company that they can assume a very high discount rate so that their liabilities look low, right? And even today, they're signing off on 8-9% interest rates. Even today, when the rates were as high as they'd ever been, and we're talking 5%. So I guess that was all to say that it's very corrupt in a way that even lay people who understand financial markets, like I think Bitcoiners are, I'm actually really impressed. The average Bitcoiner knows more than the 95th percentile of person I worked with for 30 years, but they don't understand this basic thing I'm talking about. And an actuary basically gets paid to, I would say, almost to lie about what the future holds in a way that no one's going to realize or figure out. That was a glaring example. People do understand interest rates, but there are there are dozens of other assumptions that go in that can lever the value of liabilities.
Presumably, you're in that job, and Ben's talked to me about this before. You start thinking differently. You start thinking, well, that's not true. Well, hold on a second. No, we should be accounting for this and that. And actually what we're saying is not truthful and it's not right. And it's very frustrating, especially as someone who cares about these things, to just go along with something that is wrong. It just feels horrible. But when you start bringing it up, people aren't very happy about that. If you start in that culture saying, good morning, just to let you know that we are lying. That is our job, is to lie, and that we are going to cause a huge amount of problems, and what we're doing is wrong. No one's going to be like, yeah, do you know what? I hadn't thought about that. Let's talk about it. Let's see if we can change. Presumably you either go along with it, even though you work that out, and a little bit of you dies inside, but you take the money and you carry on, or you leave.
Yeah, and I would say, oh my God. I mean, I listened to Ben's conversations very, very intently. It's one of the few times I really felt like I was watching a TV show about my life in a certain way, right? But even what he experienced was just he experienced that with a bunch of people he expected to be criminals, and it was not. What I experienced was a slight step beyond that, where I saw all of society accepting it. So these guys don't just tell the CIO of a bank what the assumption is. You understand? They're testifying in court cases as expert witnesses. They're negotiating on behalf of gigantic unions. They're in charge of government agencies. And so I'm also watching the entire world go along with it. and trust them. And then watching all their financial systems get destroyed, right? So like in the last 30 years, watched Social Security, Medicare, pensions, life insurance, like you watched all of these financial systems get destroyed totally under the guise of how they were being advised.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it wasn't just that they were shit. I got just as angry as the lemmings who trusted them, which really made me unpopular. Like I
Yeah,
like
I
to say,
can
I was
imagine.
the most hated actuary on the face of this earth, and there was an anonymous message board that I was part of. I've told the story on our podcast, but like I was just a maniac, an unhinged maniac, expressing my hatred and exposing all the shit.
But you got to do it, right? I imagine that just kills your soul otherwise. I say you've got to do it. You can know what you know, and you can just bury your head in the sand and go into work in the mornings, and you're going to fucking hate yourself. Like, yeah, I see it all the time. I see people who are in those type of roles going into London. They kind of know what they're doing is like wrong, and they kind of hate themselves a bit, and they end up with cocaine problems and hooker problems and a lot of other problems where they just spend the money that they're earning on stuff to try and forget that they're actually a piece of shit. They can't take the step to go, fuck this, I'm leaving, it's bullshit.
They have acting problems. It really is what it is. It's like, it's really hard to, it really requires you act a certain way. Even if you're hiding in plain sight as a rebel, right? You can only do, like, you're still there and you can't escape yourself. I was embarrassed to say I was an actuary for a really long time. And I think it's been decades where I didn't even say this is what I did for a living. And it wasn't until I got sacked, right? And I started thinking about what I do and what I am, is that I started telling people that that's actually my profession, because I'm no longer working for them, right? I'm sort of on my own observing the financial systems that I'm observing now. And I'm okay saying that I'm doing it as an actuary, my own idealized version of what it was. It's almost like I survived it. It didn't get killed out of me in 30 years somehow. Somehow finding Bitcoin and approaching the world the way I do and the way we do has kept this little pilot light alive. And I think in some way I was supposed to survive to be able to look at the world through my lens and through what I was trained to do. But it's interesting.
Were you already... Sorry, mate.
I never shut the fuck up. I think you know this. Business Cats told me our wives listen to the show, and his wife's primary issue is how many times I interrupt him. My wife's primary issue is how many times I interrupt him.
What's his?
He doesn't have it. Business Cat's like the coolest fucking dude ever. He has no issues. He just like him and I. We just go on and do it. But we listen to our wives like we feel like they're the only ones who even listen. But they both say it's me who always interrupts. That's our running joke. So sorry, man. That's
cool. It's cool. It's hard when you don't have video. Sometimes you just have like a pause and then you both go at the same time. But I was going to say, were you already involved in Bitcoin during that time leading up to you getting fired from your work? Was it something that was already on your mind, or was this something you...
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, so I'll say now, we've covered 1974. Let's start at 2020. So I started working in 1996, and I can almost say I never really added any value for 25 years. It's not that I didn't try, but the closest I came to ever adding value anywhere was in like the mid 2000s. I started looking at pensions we started pioneering this thing that ended up getting called liability driven investments, which was blamed for the 2022 Bank of England bailout. But I didn't really add any value, in my opinion. I was trying, I learned a lot, but it's very hard to add value when you have all these people in the way that are really, you have rules that disincentivize value. You have people that just want to keep their jobs. So it's very hard to actually do that. In 2020, when the markets were going out of like completely haywire, you might recall. I wasn't in Bitcoin yet, but I was doing my particular job, which my particular job at the time was explaining the performance of a very, very complicated, like insanely complicated options system. And in 2020, like nothing was making sense. Like in February, that month of February, nothing was making sense at all. And I was up till like midnight, 1 a.m. every day because we had to send a report to our chief investment officer. So every night, like I was just up by my computer with this disturbing feeling that nothing made sense. And I did end up figuring something out that I converted into I basically converted into a program for our company that ended up making, in a very low effort, like about $50 million a year. And after about a year, once I proved that worked, I started getting a little uppity about, like I didn't ask for like pay or promotion or anything like that. I just asked to focus on this thing because it had the potential to actually be much more. It had the potential to, bring in hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And it's something really stupid that anybody could have figured out, but it just happened to be, I happened to be the autistic one that spent enough time on it. So, I started really battling with the company about focusing on doing this. And so anytime I got shit about a project that wasn't this, basically told them that I didn't give a shit, like, why am I there's like hundreds of millions of dollars that all I have to do is spend like 10 hours, we don't have to call a bank. We don't have to make any deals. We don't have to do any weird balance sheet shit. It's literally, you have to get me to want to do this for 10 hours. And then, and so I started getting, I just started getting angry. And, one of the things I was counting on was that the greed would eventually, like I wouldn't lose my job. At some point they would look in the mirror and say, well, we do need this money.
Yeah, you would think someone would go, $100 million sounds quite nice. Like, let's give it a go.
This was validated. This is like validated. We actually, we were a large insurance company in the S&P 500, and we paid a $50 million dividend to ourselves based on this program. Like, this was legit. So once I realized, I kind of figured it was too late for them once they did that, right? They can't stop now, right? And so it really actually brings up a lot of questions I have now about, like, why is it that companies don't care about making money and things like that? But that's essentially how we got to the point where I got sacked in May of this year. Yeah.
And so they were just like, look, stop going on about it. We don't care about the money. You got to pipe down. You were like, fuck off. Don't tell me to do anything else. This is the most important.
Well, if I'm being honest, I thought that this was more important, yes, than anything else they had going on. And I thought it should be the only thing I focused on. I thought it should be the only thing I spent my time on. And that, I didn't even want to be told, being told to work on anything else. It was like insulting. And so their attitude basically became, look, dude, we could do this without you. So we could just let you go. And I'm like, you think you can, but you cannot. You can do 50 million without me. No problem. Right. You'll fuck it up, but you can do it, but you're not going to go any further. And then, so then now we're 5.5 months into that game of chicken right now.
And this is presumably not something, and this is not a game you can play without their backing or without.
Yeah, actually, the only reason I was able to do this is because, it's their fucked up 10 years of decision making that enabled this to exist. So,
okay.
It's definitely possible that there are other companies that I could do this for, but at for the last 5.5 months, that thought has never entered my mind. I've only really thought about adding value. I don't care. I just don't care about that industry. I mean, I know the day's going to come and I might have to go back to fiat work, and that might be the case, but I'm not thinking about it right now. I really have been focused on trying to figure out Bitcoin, trying to figure out who I can add value to here. And I've been very busy and consumed with it. I think a lot of people after 5.5 months would be losing their mind. Maybe spending 5 hours a day on math is losing my mind, but there's a reason my brain wants to do it. Like I do it until I want to puke, and there's a reason. So so my process is I do what my brain tells me to do. Right? I don't want to do what a boss tells me to do. I usually think their judgment's bad, stupid. I do what my brain tells me to do, and my brain's telling me to study math and try to understand the financial system of Bitcoin, like as an actuary, and find some leverage points that I can add value.
Yeah, well, it's certainly an interesting skill to bring into the Bitcoin world, because you said earlier you're like, you're impressed with the knowledge that the average Bitcoiner has, and that it's above that of sort of 95% of people in the traditional financial world. But I would say often what I see is overconfident people repeating things they don't really understand to sound smart. Personally, I find it quite frustrating. I feel that people are a lot more cocksure than they should be.
I wish you could see my face right now. Yeah.
What was your face?
I wish you could see my
face
right now, because I'm just like, no, I totally agree. Like, okay. So good. It's so true, dude. Like, there's something weird that happens the second you get paid. You become a retard. So if I were to sort like the Bitcoiners that don't get paid with the ones that do, right? The ones that aren't getting paid to make at least to understand anything are miles ahead of those that do. Once you start getting paid, it's weird. Why does this happen? That all of a sudden you start making all the bad decisions that all the fiat people made, and people that before you were getting paid to do this, you were making fun of all those people. And now you're getting paid. A company is paying you, right, to do essentially the same things. This is what you mean, right? Like the second I got a sniff of like these public companies, these mining companies, these pretty much any of these companies that exist, it's like they're all of a sudden they've gone backwards. They've gone right back to fiat mindset.
It certainly feels like that. But even on a deeper level than that, I just find, and I found this myself, so I'm not like pointing fingers where I can't point them at myself, but like early days coming into Bitcoin, thinking, oh, I really understand the traditional financial system so much better than everyone else, and like I'm so much further ahead of everybody else, and I've got this whole thing mapped out, and I know what's going to happen with interest rates, and I know what's going to happen with, just like everything. I had this delusion of grandeur maybe where I thought, well, because I've worked out this Bitcoin thing, and because I've been directionally correct when I've been borrowing and buying property and timing things historically, that I'm some sort of genius. The further in time we go forward, the more I realize, no, you are a retard. I'm back to, no, I'm a retard. Yeah, Bitcoin's good. It's probably going to do well. But outside of that, shut the fuck up. When I reflect on it, I'm like, you don't fucking know what you're talking about, mate. You know a little bit of something, but really actually have a guess where interest rates are going to go. Really actually have a guess what's going to happen in the next 6 months. And I can fucking guarantee you I'll be wrong.
Yeah. So just because you know more than somebody else doesn't mean you're ready to be responsible for a giant pot of money, right? And really the reason you know more than them is because they just have tumors on their brain, right? They have lesions that are just not that are keeping them from understanding very basic things, right? It's not even that your average Bitcoiner has some superior understanding of things. It's like there's this old expression, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the other guy. That's true for bar conversations, right? And that's true for like building a general worldview for yourself, right? It's definitely not true for like being responsible now for money. Like you actually have to outrun the bear at that point, right? So I think a lot of guys develop a sense of themselves by there's a certain power from realizing that the emperor has no clothes, right? Once you're over that, I still think it takes, that doesn't necessarily mean this doesn't mean we're ready to manage some kind of big money. You see all these, they're like little man children running around blowing up companies,
All the people of influence tend to be pretty retarded, and they tend to have ulterior motives. There's an arrogance that goes with it, which I just find a real turn off. And as you said, it is often talking to the people who don't get heard, who have got something interesting to say. You know, they've got something new to say. They're thinking about things a little bit differently. And it's also that like first year, 2 years, 3 years of being involved in Bitcoin where it really, really grips you. And you're just like, whoa, this thing's amazing. And then you can quite easily get lost by just listening to waffle, the same old waffle from Saylor and all these different guys who get on all these stages. And it starts to be less interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've now become, I think, pretty hated in this space now because, like,
oh really?
Because we had our big Bitcoin meetup last night. It was really, we have a great meetup in Philly, and Alan Farrington was there. I mean, you know, it's that kind of a meetup, right? Where like, you know, you might have somebody like that come, and so we also get all the the fiat simpies that you know want to talk about NGU and all that shit, right? And there's a guy, he's very well known. I think he sits on the boards of some of these companies that we're talking about. I would even say that he's knowledgeable. Yes. However, I actually think I forced a tear out of his eye last night because he was asking me how I felt about institutional adoption, and I just like looked at him dead in the eye, and I was like, "It's not happening. There is no institutional adoption." I feel very strongly about this. I wrote a paper about it a year ago called "Hodling is a Human Action," and it's about like how Bitcoin is uniquely human. And it was back then like why it was institutional adoption was never really. I thought it was never going to work. I recently reread the paper, and I was like, yeah, this kind of holds up. I still feel this way now. And I swear I forced a tear out of the guy's eye, and I could feel him getting like super angry at me. Like, why won't you just shut the fuck up? And that's like, this is part of my role. Like I was born to be this guy, you know, it just is what it is.
When you say you don't believe institutional adoption is going to happen, do you
Anytime
not class ETFs and those kind of things as institutional adoption?
I do, but what people think is going to happen with them is that companies are going to allocate like 5% of their pensions. Like people think that there's going to be trillions of dollars coming in through the ETFs, through institutions. That's not happening in the near future, in my opinion. I'll start with why I think it's uniquely individual first, right? Which is that I think, first of all, anyone buys Bitcoin, right? Everybody buys Bitcoin. Institutions, individuals, they all buy Bitcoin. We may see institutions coming in buying Bitcoin, and then you guys will all be like, hey, I remember that Confab episode, that fucking prick said it wasn't going to happen. And that's fine, but that's fine. I was told last night that I looked like Peter McCormack, and I almost wanted to punch this guy in the face. I couldn't believe it.
That's not fine.
That was not fine. Anyway, companies are not like people, okay? People are unreasonable. Individuals can be ungovernable if they want to, right? You have individuals doing all kinds of unreasonable shit all over the world, right? And one of them is hodling Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's an incredibly unreasonable thing to do. In fact, it's probably illegal. And when I say it's probably illegal, I mean like if a trustee ever figures out that he is in charge of a portfolio that has Bitcoin in it, despite there being no explicit law, that trustee will feel to himself that he must remove it in order to be legally on solid ground, right? So any institution with a trustee isn't right now going to be, you know, they're an automatic sell, right? If they figure out there's any Bitcoin exposure. It's very hard for two people to agree on hodling Bitcoin, right? It's a lot harder than one, okay? One person can be very unreasonable. Two people, you're going to get a little more reasonable. And the bigger the company, the more reasonable you have to be. The more governance you have to get approval from. And, you know, even a board that one day is psychotic enough to say, yes, we see why this is important and we're going to do this. 3 months later, if Bitcoin goes down by 20%, that Bitcoin will all be gone. They won't stay. They won't hodl. There's no company that is going to hodl through a 10-year period. no matter what happens through 80% drawdowns. You know, MicroStrategy worked the way it did because that one dude was the company. You know, he happened to be his company. And that guy, I could tell you, I mean, I just did a whole, it's not an entire episode, but the majority of the episode was around why he's not one of us. And I had a very strong reaction to his appearance on Savadin's podcast about it. Really, I think he pulled the mask off. He pulled the mask off and really told us he's sucking JP Morgan's dick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's the most capable. Like, he is an individual. I think in the paper I wrote, I covered Elon, you know, so like, you know, you can have an individual who doesn't really fully get it, but an institution, there's just so many reasons why they're never going to hang on to that Bitcoin, right? And even with the ETF, they're not holding Bitcoin, right? Knut Svanholm's quote, MicroStrategy doesn't hold any Bitcoin, some guy does, right? El Salvador doesn't hold any Bitcoin, some guy does. I would tend to think that there might have been a time where Michael Saylor was on an individual journey with Bitcoin. You know, he relinquished being the CEO of the company. Like, it started to cost him shit to really hold his Bitcoin, but he never held his keys. And we just released an episode called Gulp Limit. Like, I think you have to be responsible for your own net worth up to some scare gulp limit for it to have that effect on you where you're like, it gives you the fuck you money power, and you're no longer interested in what a bank cares about. And if you're not holding your own keys, you're not sovereign. You're not pushing yourself to the limits of your own sovereignty. You're probably just very comfortable, and you just end up in NGU world, right? I forgot what the original question was, but that, I feel like that was why institutions, you know, so it's like you're relying on boards, committees, you're relying on people who have no connection to this Bitcoin whatsoever, right?
I've never worked in that kind of environment, so it's difficult for me to really wrap my head around it. But I imagine what you're saying is, it's like when you have huge boards and groups of people, getting anything done is probably quite difficult. There's all these like internal rules and politics and bullshit that just means making any changes is probably quite hard, especially one that is considered possibly reckless. And yeah, you may have like one person or two people in a board meeting who are saying, no, we're Bitcoiners, we understand this, like, we have our entire net worth in this, we fully think this is the best thing that we could have our money in, but they're not the ones that are going to be listened to. And like you say, when there is this drawdown, everyone will turn around and be like, right, I fucking told you, sell this shit, let's buy some other nonsense. So I think I understand what you mean. I don't really care either way. I think it would be nice to see more individuals hold it. Like, where I want to see people hold it is builders and plumbers and general people who have like normal jobs who are struggling. Cash is being phased out. It's getting harder for people to just get by. They're being squeezed from every angle. And they're people who would understand, because they're used to like keep some cash somewhere, don't have that through the books. People on that human level, I think, understand it and they need it. And so that's where I'd like to see the growth, because it's still only a very, very, very small percentage of people. Like, I don't talk to anyone about Bitcoin anymore. I just have given up with it, like in normal fiat world. Like, even if people ask me, like if I'm at the gym or I'm doing whatever, if someone asks me what I do, I would never tell them what I do. Maybe 1% or 2% of people that I know hold a little bit, and the rest like wouldn't even consider it.
Yeah, and it's really just, I think it's comfort and not understanding how much you do need it. You know, people just don't understand how much they need a money that can't be taken from them. And they don't, it's not just about holding on to your money, right? It's about living a life of being subject. This is, I don't know. I mean, I feel like most people just are perfectly fine subjecting themselves, but that's fine. You know, that is fine for them. But there's a lot of people that just don't want to do that, that are like, fuck that. And you know what? Why should somebody have to be poor because they don't want to listen to some shithead prioritize what they do with their life? I mean, I don't think that's the way the world evolved, right? I don't think that's how we evolved at all. I think it's a mistake. It's an error that's gone out of control. And whether you believe it's divine or lucky, I think Bitcoin came to fix this error.
It does definitely feel like if ever it's been needed, if ever there's a time where I've looked around and been like, fuck, people need this thing. Like, it's now.
Good people who know that they're being subjected to lesser men need it.
Mm-hmm.
They know they need it. I think that's what it comes down to, right? We don't need it. Everybody in the world doesn't need it. It'd be nice, but it's not. I mean, everybody in the world is, honestly, it's like, I feel like that. I think this whole scaling issue just gets brought up as an excuse to, it's yet another reason why people don't accept the limitations. Accepting the limitations is why it works the way it does for the 1,000 or 100,000 people that really, truly need it. Like, I feel like these people are such jerk offs, these scalers, it's just to get another reason to start a company. It's just they got a bunch of funding and they need to do something with it. So let's use this line that, oh, well, the whole world needs it. Though if Bitcoin has failed, if we can't give it to the entire world, it drives me fucking crazy.
Side chains and all these different, all these projects to make some extra money. I agree. Like, I use on-chain most of the time. It costs you, fucking like a few pennies to send on-chain at the moment. Yeah, there are spikes sometimes. Lightning sort of works okay sometimes when you need it. If there is particularly high fees, it's fine. And there's going to be like a flood of people any day now, whether it's institutions or it's some country where there's a problem or whatever the narrative is of the day is never usually right. What I kind of see is just more people who are using it use it more often. Like, there's a massive difference now how much I use Bitcoin. Like, every single day I use Bitcoin multiple times a day. But when I first was involved, I'd make like one transaction in a year or two. And then it kept scaling up and up and up and up. And actually, if I think about it, like, how many transactions are made in a day through like me and Ungovernable Misfits? Hundreds.
Wow.
We've got hundreds of payments going through Lightning, the podcasting 2.0 stuff, responding back to messages, going through Nostr, organizing the clothing. We buy all our VPNs and storage and hosting and virtual machines and all the shit that we use. All of it is paid in Bitcoin the whole way through. And so maybe it's not necessarily a case of like you need more and more and more people. Maybe it's just that it gets better and better and more used, and the networks of people, like within the Meshtadel, of people who accept Bitcoin for goods and services grows. That's just as good.
I think so. I think that people who don't use Bitcoin are just eventually no different from institutions. I think it's, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not using it, this thing came up last night in this meetup too, and I grabbed the microphone and kind of just made everybody feel badly in the room. But this question came up. It was posed to Alan, and I could see Alan he got annoyed with it. But this question was asked that, like, oh, you have Michael Saylor and all these Winklevi and all these people, and he basically is like, if we fast forward to the year 2048 and 99% of the Bitcoin is already allocated, he said, is it even freedom money anymore? And it was posed to Alan like it was like a fireside chat type format, and he gave an answer. He looked super annoyed with it, and I asked for the mic and basically said that I hated the framing of this question. All due respect to the guy that asked it, but I hated the framing that it's about what Michael Saylor cares about or people like that. Because like those people who say don't use your Bitcoin, right? They're never going to dictate whether or not Bitcoin is freedom money or not. They don't get to say. The same way like that Bitmain, just because they were the most powerful company at the time, got to determine what Bitcoin was, right? It's everybody else that gets to say. I feel like the people that do need to use it are always going to they're going to do it and they're going to be the best at it. So I think there's, from being good at it and from the people who don't use it being bad at it, that's a big advantage to those who use it. And then there's this other obvious point that we're not just going to wake up in 2048 where, we're all rich, blah, 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 right? You have to get there. And like the idea that anyone's going to get there without using the majority of the Bitcoin that they've stacked is incredibly naive. It's just incredibly naive to think that you're not going to touch, like that you're not going to need to use it, right? What a Pollyannish view of the world you must have.
Well, I think people put their lives on hold as well. I spoke to, was it Zach I was talking to about this? Might have been. I was saying about, I've sold the majority of my stack because I've made the plunge to go full time with this podcast. And I want to make sure while I'm doing that, the family eats good quality food. I got myself a gym membership, trying to live a life where I'm not just waiting for the price to go up to some magical number. Okay, now I can live. Because I sort of did that for a while. Like I worked multiple jobs. I crammed doing all this stuff into the evenings. I started to not enjoy what I was doing because I was doing way too much and always had that pressure. I was always waiting I won't buy what I need today because, Bitcoin could 10x and then, this £100 that I was going to spend on that, that's 1,000 and, always doing this kind of calculation the whole time. Thinking about starting businesses, thinking about going full time with a pod, and it was always going around my head. And I always was like, no, just hold on another 6 months, just hold on another year. At the same time, literally having crippling panic attacks, pulling over on the side of the road, thinking I'm having a fucking heart attack. And then just accepting that, no, this is all worth it. And it's not. Especially when you have kids, you realize, I'm not going to have a heart attack and leave them without a dad. I'm not going to be that fucking retard. I'm going to spend some Bitcoin. I have to.
Yeah, and it's funny. Most people, just to get them to wait another month before they get their new phone, the current money doesn't incentivize people waiting, right? So, yes, if you go full blown, if you're fully on Bitcoin, you can go to the other side of the spectrum where it's you got a Fred Flintstone car that you're half carrying, right?
I don't even have a car anymore. I sold that. I've got a bicycle now.
But you could get to the point, right? You can get to that point. But the thing is, you get to find that point for yourself. I think is the bottom line. Whereas without Bitcoin, you don't get. You're stuck with washing machines that don't work after a year. You're stuck with toxic food. You're just stuck with all that shit, and you don't have anything. You don't have anything to say about it. So at the very least, you get to put yourself on a spectrum and discover where, the kind of person you are and how you want to live. And if you, even if you have a stack of Bitcoin, but you believe you should never sell it because, oh my God, I don't want to pay $100,000 for a cup of coffee because that's the math people do in their heads.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's the most expensive cup of coffee I ever had in my life. I'm never going to do that again. We're so early, dude. We're so early that we don't even really know how to live in this world. That is why I created Rock Paper Bitcoin. It's before it was a podcast, it was a paper that I wrote to try to sort all this shit out. I realized Bitcoin really broke me. I'm older than most people in the space, so I have a lot of things to unlearn.
You can't be older than John.
Yeah, I am older than John.
Fucking hell, you are old. He's very old.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You're a wise old man.
I am a wise old man, and I do think I think that's something I do bring to the space is a little bit of wisdom, but also it shattered my world to realize how much is wrong in my worldview. So how am I supposed to trust that I really should spend hours and hours and hours in certain rabbit holes, right? If I know my worldview is wrong. So to me, that's not a good foundation for confident action, right? I created this thing called Rock Paper Bitcoin. It was a way of looking at the world, maybe link in the show notes or whatever. But it was that, and that's how that was the genesis of the podcast was we're both okay, what the fuck do we do now? We don't know how to live. And in general, people, it's not a slight. It's we have not discovered how to live on hard money. We've gone through enough generations without it that we don't know how to do it, and it has to be rediscovered, and it's ugly. It's watching somebody learn to play the violin. It's sounds like shit until it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other point is, when people say, oh, you should never sell your Bitcoin, at the same time, they'll say, like, I don't even know the numbers, I can't remember now, but like annualized return on Bitcoin is X, and, but you should never sell it. And you think, well, if it does continue as it has, and if you are right with your projections, then, slicing off a few percent every year just to like make sure that you have some health and like you're not fucking miserable would still make sense, because you're still going to be in a very, very good spot. It's still like basic money management that anyone should be able to do. Just never sell unless you're in like a extremely well-paid job and you already have everything that you need and there's absolutely no need for you to use Bitcoin for any reason. Then, I kind of get it, whatever, that's fine. But, for most of us, we're not in that position.
To get out of that job, you're going to need to use your Bitcoin. So like, and that's
exactly,
like I would have never been able to put up the fight that I did that got me fired, which I considered that an accomplishment. So I got, my outcome was because of a fight that I put up, and I put that fight up knowing that I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, people say, and this is like the thing that drove me crazy about what Saylor said, Bitcoin is a non-performing asset. Are you fucking crazy? Like it gave, knowing what I have gave me the strength to do what honestly 99.9% of the world was absolutely unwilling to do and will prostitute themselves before they do. The step that they would take to leave their subjugation, right? I mean, how could that be a non-performing asset when it literally is the thing I'm relying on? Its mere existence is what makes my family feel like this is okay, that we can do this. You have to live day to day in this world, right? It's just like an oxymoron that it's like Karen two episodes ago, who was talking about the ketamine trips.
Oh, what a retard! Yeah.
Well, it's like we live in a disassociated world where you have like people talking to people, giving advice.
Mm-hmm.
They're not giving advice to that person. They're giving advice to like some person that lives in an alternate universe. Somebody who owns Bitcoin doesn't want fiat advice. Okay. It's good fiat advice. Don't sell your investments. Okay. But it's really bad Bitcoin advice that don't use your Bitcoin. Right. It's bad. Right. It's like to me, it's nefarious. It's like the only reason he would say that is because, he doesn't want me to ruin his little NGU game. It's the only reason he would give me that bad advice, knowing nothing else about the guy. It's almost like we have there's like a collected cult that just doesn't want to upset that apple cart, right? Totally focused on price, but it's pretty obvious for anyone with a soul to see how wrong-headed all that is. Bitcoin's a really powerful tool. You use it whether you spend it or not. Just having it, just knowing you have it. It's like brandishing a gun, right? It's like knowing you have the gun. It means, okay, I can go into a dangerous neighborhood with a little bit, like you're using it. Whether or not you pull a trigger or you pull it out, you're using it. You're using the fact that you have it.
Yeah, it gives you a confidence and it gives you an option. With your job, it's like it gives you the option to do what you believe is right and to have that fight. Having that as just like a cushion where you can take a few risks where you need to and make the decisions you need to, and you have just something to fall back on, is really powerful, because you end up acting completely differently. You don't nod along to things that you otherwise would because you feel you have to. You think differently. It changes your whole life. The way you think, the way you move, the way you interact with other people.
Well, yeah, because you're not asking. You're in charge. That's the key. It's just you're in charge of yourself, right? So you're not walking around asking other people to tell you how to think about things. You do have to be willing to pull that trigger, though. You could LARP yourself into a very damaging situation. You could probably LARP yourself into a worse slavery than you were in to begin with. If you walk around, and so in the business world, in the corporate world, at least in finance, the correct adaptation is to walk around like you don't care about money. And so people do that. People do a pretty good job of acting like they don't give a shit about money. I think if Ben is listening, he's nodding his head. He's like, yeah, dude, totally. I mean, if there's a book, Liar's Poker, I think it is. It's like the first Michael, the guy that wrote The Big Short. I forgot his name. Michael Lewis.
Burry? No, Mike Burry is the guy.
Yeah, Michael Lewis wrote it, and it was about his time at Solomon Brothers and Mortgage Desk. Anyway, first paragraph, he's like, number one rule is nobody talks about money, and you act like you don't give a shit about money. But they very much do. You know what I mean? Like they very, very, very much do. But you have to walk around like, I don't care if I get fired. I don't care. You know, that's the act, right?
Mm-hmm.
But unless you're really willing to walk away, unless you're really willing to pull that trigger, you know, you become a slave to that act. But like the people with the power know you're full of shit.
Mm.
You know, so you're like almost in a worse situation than you were in if you were just like, thank you, sir, may I please have another. Yeah.
And what's your plans now? Like you said, it's 5 months. You're obviously honing your math skills. Have you got any thoughts?
Well, it's almost like prayer. The math work I do is like prayer. I don't understand. I can't really explain why I do it. It's not to learn more math. I mean, it's not to be better at it for a reason.
Mm.
It's to, I think it's filling a spiritual hole in some way that maybe it's because I need more conviction in myself to be in the stage of my life. Like studying math will give you conviction in yourself. Like I could tell that to anybody here. If you spend a month getting better at something in math, you will have more conviction in yourself. There's like no way around it. It's like if you go to spend serious time training physically, you will have more conviction in yourself. So like, I think it's a big reason why I do that. I really don't know I don't have a plan, and it's like really bothering my wife. I don't know what I'm doing really yet. I'm trying to throw a bunch of logs in the fire. I know I probably want to teach in some way, but there's no way I don't know how that makes money. Maybe create a game and sell it. I've thought about teaching through games, things like that. I don't know. I do think like, I have, for now, I don't have an enormous amount of pressure. My family is fine. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I have this huge amount of pressure to go back. But I do feel pressure to make some money so that I know I'm adding value. Mm. I don't think I know I can't run around in the world just not doing anything, like not having the world tell me that I'm adding value. Like that to me, I know that can't continue. That's been happening for a few months, right? So like I need some value signal that I'm on the right track. I need something like that for sure, right? And I'm not going to, going back to fiat isn't the best form of that. It's kind of shitty form of that. It may be the one I end up having to do, but at least I kind of want to know what's my time worth. Like we're setting up a geyser for the podcast just to see if people are willing to, what people are willing to pay. Kind of like what you guys, you're doing with the t-shirt. It's just to see, okay, well, what's out there? What are people willing to pay? What's my time worth in sats? Nobody knows. It's another thing we're very early at, and nobody on earth understands what their time is worth, right? So, like, I feel like if it's inevitable that I have to go back to that fiat shit, I want to have a bunch of logs in the fire that could add value in Bitcoin, so that maybe I can work on those things in parallel.
It's important, as we all know, like having some purpose, doing something that you feel is adding value to the world. And even if you're doing, like I was doing with my fiats, like my fiat work was adding no value to the world, like none at all. It wasn't fulfilling and it added no value, but it paid the bills. And then, you carry on with the pod and whatever else I was doing that I did care about in the evenings and early in the mornings and on the weekends, because that's what actually feeds the soul and feels good and you actually care about. But you've got to have that, whether whether it's on the side with something else or full time. Either way, you have to have it. Otherwise, it's a miserable existence. Otherwise, that feeling of like, well, I did it for years, like in previous work where it was relatively well paid. It was, most people consider it a pretty decent job and like had a nice car and all that stuff. But like, just get home in the evenings and just be like,
people make you feel bad.
No, not even people make you feel bad. Like I made myself feel bad because I just get home and be like, what the fuck have I done that's actually of use? And everything that I've fixed today is going to be fucking broken tomorrow again. And if I die tomorrow, no one's going to care. Like nothing that I'm doing here matters. And that was
Yeah.
just the general feeling.
I don't know how old you are, but like imagine getting to John's age and my age
Yeah, God.
and still feeling that way. Like actually, really taking, I think that's what midlife crises are all about. I think you get to a certain age and you have this realization, like, I haven't done anything. Holy shit. And it's like it's all such a lie. It could go in a fucking snap. Then what?
It's weird, isn't it, how you think about that? Because like when you're young, or at least for me, it was like get a house, get a car, be able to afford stuff, just like you're chasing to like have a better quality of life. And then it's only once you get to that comfort zone of like, oh, I can sit back a little bit now. Like I'm not chasing my way out of a shit situation. And it gives you time to like think, and you reflect and you go, am I happy? Like, because you're too busy before to think like, am I happy? Or like, am I doing anything that's valuable? As you have more time, you question that kind of stuff, and you do think like, the big thought I had when I left my like first like proper career and like went and just started painting every day. That's what I did for like a year and a half. Just literally smoked weed, painted, trained, did that on repeat because I just like got burnt out with work. And it was during that time I was like, yeah, what I was doing, if I was on my deathbed and I was thinking about my life, I'd be thinking, you fucking wasted this time. What you've done it's like not worth doing. Whereas at least with like the painting or, with the podcast, I feel like at least it like touches some people, interacts with people, like hopefully brings some joy to some people, hopefully gets a laugh or like get some information out to someone, and like there's a bit of a community around it. And I feel like, at least if I get hit by a bus, I could be like, yeah, I've done something kind of cool. And that's got a huge value, more than you can buy.
Yeah, it's it's real validation. I did stand up, probably thought that was my midlife crisis. It wasn't, but it was definitely it was like an immune response to my life. And 12 years ago, I started doing stand up, and I'm pretty sure I did it to have my worldview validated, because it wasn't nothing in my professional life. No amount of success was doing it. No amount of finally rising through the ranks, and which, for a retard like me is actually quite an accomplishment. To ever have one of those people be like, yeah, he should have more responsibility is pretty remarkable. But those things were always ultimately not validating. But like putting my heart and soul into something I genuinely thought was funny and having people agree that that was the case kind of told me maybe, okay, I maybe have a sense that I'm on the right track. Like maybe I can trust myself a little bit, because what I think is funny, other people think is funny. So it's part of that getting that validation, which I didn't know at the time I was going to need. Only the first time. Then it was like, damn, why this isn't even scary anymore. This kind of sucks. Now I get why people do drugs and stuff like that. Like it gets not terrifying. After that first time, the first time was an incredible rush. Like you really fought through you really put your ass on the line. I remember thinking, man, if they don't like this, I'm never going to do this again. Maximum slaying of your own inner pussy. Getting through it was like, I felt like such a fucking man. It was incredible. And it's funny. It's kind of like getting punched in the face if you're a man. It's like, I always said everyone should get punched in the face, should get fired from a job, just to get it over with and know that you're not going to die if those things happen. And getting up on stage in a really vulnerable way. Like a lot of people do stand up in a non-vulnerable way, and you could tell, and they usually do terribly. But when you get up in a vulnerable way, meaning like you really care, like you actually, really care how it goes. It's pretty fucking incredible. But then once you get over it, you start having to take more risks just to get that feeling. You start wanting to do more fucked up things just to get that feeling back.
just to feel like on the edge of like, oh, is this too far? Is this going to be silence, or like someone's going to throw something at me?
I've done it on certain podcasts too, Ed, where like because I have that general urge sometimes to take it just feels like it's there, and I want to
Yeah.
take it to that level, and then I'll spend like the next 5 days thinking, oh my God, they're never going to have me back again. Like, oh, but there's something about going through that I enjoy. that anguish about like, oh my God, am I really the most hated man in the world? Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, you are certainly not the most hated man on this podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, mate.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that very much.
I really, really hope that you find something where your skills can be used. I'm confident that you will. And yeah, I'm happy to hear that you took this jump. It's fucking weird that you sit and do maths 5 hours a day, I have to say. But it's cool. I like that weirdness. I like the dedication.
Yeah, we don't. It's like I think it was Michael Burry who did say like, we don't choose these things; they choose us. Right? He's like, I could have easily just been interested in reading the phone book than reading mortgage contracts. But it's like once it's like that autistic little fairy dust taps you on the shoulder, you're fucked. This is kind of what you do. But that's why it's so important. But that's why it's like really important to have, like a high degree of integrity in your life, because you want to have some belief that it's not going to be for nothing. Like you want to have this belief that like God wants you to do this. Like he would have to want me to do this for me to do it, because it's fucking insane otherwise, right? It's a big battle for conviction if you think about it. And that's what I think people need in this space now anyway, right? Is that battle, like you're fighting for your life for that conviction. I don't know if we dropped off or if that was just so deep.
No, I was just thinking about what you said, and you're like, we're just fighting for our lives. And I was like, yeah, sometimes it does feel like that. And then I just got lost in thought for a minute.
That's a great moment, dude. That was like a really great moment just now, because it is real. I mean, it really is fucking real. Like, I made a lot of money, and enough that I can be pretty kind of living comfortably at this moment. But I'm still fighting for my life, and I think like that gets expressed in what I do with my time. It like clearly expresses the battle I'm in. I'm not on the golf course. I'm not. Maybe that would have. That's what it is for other people. But if you look at what I do all day, you could tell I'm in a fight for my life over something.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe it will go somewhere, mate, and we'll see where we are in sort of 6 months to a year. But it's been really good getting to know you a little bit, and I'd suggest to anyone who hasn't already, check out Rock Paper Bitcoin, check out the things you've written, and if you're knowledgeable and into maths, maybe hook up and have these conversations. I'm not, so it's not something I can talk about, but I appreciate that other people out there are doing it and checking things out, and hopefully crunching the numbers and making sure we're not all just complete fucking retards, and that hopefully we're right, and hopefully this Bitcoin thing stays around and we're all going to be okay. This fight actually is one that we win.
We are. That I'm sure of. I'm sure that we're right, and I really do. I appreciate you having me on. And I really, I tend to believe that having these conversations is what causes the world to go where we want it to. So what you said, I hope you find a way. I think it's like putting this out on a platform like yours that gets listened to a lot, gets heard, is what causes that result. I have nothing but belief that we are going to win, and that I have total belief that I'm going to find a way to be part of that, doing what I was born to do.
Let's keep in contact. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best place to contact you? Just Twitter or?
Yeah, Twitter. It's B Brian Paul. That was my comedy name, by the way, in case anybody wonders what the fuck that is. B Brian Paul. B Brian Paul. Brian with an I. That was my comedy name because I didn't want to be doxxed. I got a very general evergreen name. That's my Twitter. So that's my Twitter handle. And everyone pretty much can find me on either the Meshadel group or, wherever they are. And you guys know, reach out. I always love it.
I hope you enjoyed that. And to everyone who's been supporting the show by sharing, liking, boosting, or all the other ways that you've been helping this show grow. I want to say a big thank you from me and all of the Ungovernable Misfits. If you haven't already checked out the website, ungovernablemisfits.com, it's well worth taking a look. We have articles, podcasts, clothing, and artwork. Thanks again for all the support, and I'll catch you on the next one.